Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk KFYO. Joining us on the phones right now, RNC Senior Communications Advisor for Black Media Affairs. Joining us on the phones. You've probably seen him on Fox News and other outlets as well. Dennard joining us here on the show. Paris, good morning. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Doing great. Appreciate you joining us on the program today. We were talking about Joe Biden saying things that really not too wise. One of those recently talking to a radio show out in New York and telling the host that if you don't know the difference between me and Trump, you're not black enough. Pierce, that really that stung a lot of folks, both on the left and the right, it seems.
Well, I have to push back on you and correct you. You said it's something that it wasn't wise. I will take it a step further. I agree it wasn't wise, but it was also bigoted.
Yeah.
And it's time that we start calling a spade and calling Joe Biden out for the bigoted comments that he has made throughout his 44-year career as a public servant. This is a man who is proud of being a bigot and saying the things that he says openly and publicly. This is not someone who hides behind it or tries to sugarcoat it. Even when his so-called apology, he said, "I apologize for being so cavalier." But he didn't apologize for trying to actually excuse the 1994 crime bill that he wrote. He actually went as far as to try to insinuate or say that it didn't lead to the mass incarceration and very harsh penalties for young black African-American men, disproportionately impacting our black community and black families and hurting black generational wealth for decades. This is a man who has for years gotten away with these sentiments and policies, and it's time now that the black community sees Joe Biden for exactly who he is, a 77-year-old man sitting in his quarantined basement, out of touch and out of step with modern America. You were so right, Chad, when you said that he offended black Republicans and black liberals, because you remember there were people who were from the black community not supporting him in the Democrat primary. Mm-hmm. They were supporting people like Cory Booker or Kamala Harris or Amy Klobuchar or even Bernie Sanders. So even using his rationale, even they are not black. And it's a shame, and it's disgusting.
Well, and then yesterday, you have Biden who comes out, and I think it was yesterday, and he says, "Well, it was the host. The host was being a wise guy." And,
blame the host.
Yeah, exactly. Blame the host, who was not trying to be a wise guy. He was I think as a radio host. We don't really like it when the aide comes over the phone and goes, "We need to wrap it up because he's about to get into a dangerous territory. Please wrap up." We don't like that. We still have questions, and I think the radio host was upset by that. And all he was doing was saying, "Hey, we still have questions for you," which I think is if you're running for president of the United States, it's a pretty reasonable request, right?
It's a reasonable request, but you know what? I think the real reason why Joe Biden was being so snarky and being so rude against Charlamagne Tha God was because Charlamagne went out and actually said after the interview that Joe Biden was on the front lines of mass incarceration, that Joe Biden's rhetoric, he was not interested in hearing his rhetoric and talk. He wanted to see an actual black agenda. What has he done for us lately? These are the things that Charlamagne said after the interview. And I'm sure that didn't sit well with him at all, because he wants to put Charlamagne in a box. How dare you speak against me? I'm Joe Biden. Even Simone Sanders got upset with me, his senior advisor, when I called into question the fact that she said it said in jest, and she told me, you need to sit this one out. This is what the Biden campaign does. If you question them, they try to push you down, silence you, and then I will end with this point. It's voter suppression, because what Joe Biden is trying to do to the black community is say, if you don't vote the way we think you should vote, you have no connection to your community. You aren't black. And so if you are young, trying to figure out this political game and these political figures in this presidential election, and you might be free-thinking and independent, and you think President Trump is doing good things for the community, and you think the Republican Party deserves a chance, but you have Joe Biden openly questioning your blackness on a national black radio show, then you might think twice about it because you don't want the ridicule. That's a technique. That's a tactic, and we have to call it out for what it is.
Paris, here's another thing that, for when Joe Biden said what he said, the only thing that surprised me about it is that, in a way, he was telling what the Democrats have always thought, right? That because you're black, because you're a minority, whatever minority that may be, you're supposed to vote for the Democrats. That it's just a thing where you're supposed to vote for the Democrats and not question why you should vote for the Democrats. Meanwhile, you have President Trump over here, and you know all the stats behind what President Trump has done for not only the African American community, but for Hispanics and other minorities as well. When you talk about unemployment rates and criminal justice reforms that Joe Biden hasn't even touched.
Well, you just laid it out. It's really about the record. When Joe Biden said, "Look at my record, man, look at my record." Well, let's examine the record. And I think that once the black community in particular, but I think when all of America looks at Joe Biden's record compared to the record, his 44-year record compared to President Trump's 4-year record, and what he's done for the country, but more narrowly tailored to the black community, it's really impressive. The things that you talked about, and support for HBCUs and school choice and opportunity zones, and even the legislation that was created for the tax cuts, and the things how that helped small business in the economy. And just even yesterday, the president didn't look to Congress; he just did it himself through the administration, and reduced the cost for insulin for people, seniors with diabetes, to $35 a month for a month's supply of insulin, cutting the cost up to 60% in some cases. And in some seniors on Medicare Part B, it might be free. That disproportionately impacts the black community in a positive way. That's the legacy of the Donald Trump administration. That's something that Joe Biden knows he can't stand on a debate stage and try to go against, because he's going to fall flat because he just doesn't have it.
Paris, I get this question all the time from listeners. What can the Republican Party, what can the Trump campaign do to continue this outreach to dispel the myths of voting Republican, to dispel the myth that the Democrats are the ones who care about the African American and Hispanic communities? What more can Republicans and the Trump campaign do?
Well, the Republican Party under the leadership of Ronna McDaniel, as well as the Trump campaign with Black Voices for Trump, are doing just that and have been doing it as a continuation of what the president started in 2016. The engagement efforts actually never stopped on the president's time, from the campaign trail to him governing in the White House and now for the reelection campaign. And so it's the creation of Black Voices for Trump. It's the regular the community centers that we're opening up across the country. Over 15 are going to be opened up as soon as we can safely do that under the direction of the local and state officials. We have a growing social media presence. We are advertising and doing direct engagement and interviews with black media as well, because we want to be able to reach the black community on every platform. So if they use mainstream, if they listen to conservative talk programs, if they listen to you, if they listen to black-owned stations or read black newspapers, we want to be everywhere, because we want to show the community that the president is trying to earn the vote and earn their respect. And so our engagement has never ceased, and it's only increased, and that's because it's a priority to the president, it's a priority to the RNC, and it's a priority to the Trump campaign. Paris,
appreciate you joining us today, giving us some insight into what the Trump campaign is doing, what the RNC is doing, and, of course, responding to Joe Biden's comments that he made last week, and he really doesn't seem apologetic for. It's one thing to say, I was being cavalier, and then blame it on the radio host. I mean, that's not really an apology, so that's just I guess, as Nancy Pelosi would say, that's just Joe Biden being Joe Biden.
Exactly. Hey, Joe Biden being a bigot.
Joe, Paris, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And let's visit again before the election.
I hope so many times. Thank you.
Thank you. That's Paris Dennard joining us here on the Chad Hasty Show, RNC Senior Communications Advisor for Black Media Affairs.